How you doing, guys? Jake here. Today what we're going to do is we're going to change a carburetor on a Weed-Eater in less than 10 minutes. By the way, guys, if you've not subscribed, please subscribe. We've got a lot of great videos coming up ahead. Alright, let's get started. The first thing you want to do is you want to pop off the air bonnet cover. It's a very small little cover like that. Usually it just flips over and you remove it. You're going to need a Torx wrench. Now this particular machine requires a T20 Torx screwdriver. Some of the other machines that you might want to take apart might just take a regular Phillips or a 10mm socket. Whatever the case, this takes a Torx, so you're going to have that tool available. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to pull these two screws off the top, and you're going to notice that the entire carburetor at this point is going to come loose. This is not a difficult job to do, guys, so don't get intimidated by something like this. This part right here you could pick up for 15 bucks on Amazon and deliver it to your door in 2-3 days, and you can change the carburetor instead of throwing away your entire Weed-Eater. Okay, so once you got the carburetor loose, you're going to disconnect the cable, which is the accelerator cable right there, and it's you just basically have to feed it through the little hole. Now when you take these things apart, remember you have to keep your eyes on things so you remember how you took it apart so you'll be able to put it back together. Alright, so there's your carburetor. It's going to have two little fuel lines that are poked into the fuel tank. You're going to pull those things out, and you're going to take your old carburetor, set it on the side, take out the new carburetor out of the box, and you're going to notice you could take this new carburetor and even match it up with the old carburetor and see that it's virtually the same thing. Of course, one is an aftermarket carburetor. They're pretty much just made in China. They're knockoffs. That's the reason why they can do this really inexpensively. And in any case, they seem to work fine. And for 15 bucks, you've got nothing to lose. Okay, and it's still better than replacing your Weed-Eater. So you're going to have a couple of gaskets and a couple of items in the box. Let's go ahead and just take some of those things out. You definitely don't need, they give you some spare, what they call those primer bulbs. You just need the one that's on there, but if you ever break one, because they do tend to break, you'll be able to change it. They give you a spark plug here in the case, in the box. So let's go ahead and get started. You also have some fuel line, and with the fuel line, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to trim it, and you're going to have to put it onto the carburetor, because remember, the fuel line's got to go back into the fuel tank. So you have two fuel lines. You're going to connect both of the fuel lines to the new carburetor, okay? And they'll be extra long, so what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to trim them. But remember, those fuel lines will get poked into the opening on the fuel tank here. So let's go ahead and, before we put the carb on there, let's go ahead and take the new gaskets out and place the gasket on the carburetor like that. Once we get the fuel lines poked onto the carburetor, you're going to take your accelerator cable and you're going to connect it in that little hole you can see right there, just exactly the same way you took it off. At this point in time, you're going to just line everything up to make sure everything is in position, and you're going to start on the outside and you're going to start putting your bolts through on that piece of plastic. And you're going to take your gasket, your first gasket, put it in place, make sure it's in the right configuration so it lines up properly, and then you're going to go straight through the carburetor, and then you're going to take your other gasket and you're going to put your other gasket in place. If you do it in the other way, everything's going to kind of fall, so this is the best way to do it. Start from the back and work your way forward. Push the carburetor into position. You're going to take your Torx screwdriver and you're just going to tighten everything back up again. Now that your carburetor is snugged on there, don't make it too tight. You're probably going into some plastic and aluminum parts there. You're going to have to worry about, at this point, your fuel lines. Now, your fuel lines are going to get poked back into those two little holes, like I showed you. Take the fuel lines and poke them in those little holes there. You're poking them into the fuel tank. They're going to have to dip into the fuel, okay? That's the whole purpose. So when the engine is running, it's going to draw the fuel out of the tank. But you don't want to have the fuel line sitting up into open air. It has to be sitting in the fuel. Now, with this particular carb kit, what they end up giving you is they give you a little fuel filter. See that thing right there? That little fuel filter is actually going to be sitting in the fuel. And so if there's any kind of sediment or dirt or anything that's sitting in the fuel tank, it's not going to draw it out into the carburetor. Once you get the new fuel line poked into the tank, you're going to need a pair of needle nose pliers to kind of just fish it through and pull the fuel line out like that. And the purpose of that is you need to get enough fuel line out so you can kind of line it up and see, just to make sure your fuel line will sit in the bottom of the tank no matter what. Once you find the right length, you cut it, and you're going to take your little fuel filter, poke it on the new line like that, and then you're going to drop this back into the tank. I think we're at 6 minutes now. So what we noticed is there was, for some reason they give you a thinner line there, and that thinner line does not fit well in this carburetor, in this fuel tank. Remember, this is an aftermarket product, so I guess it's kind of like a universal fit in a way. So we decided to just stick with the same size tubing in both holes, because the thinner tubing leaves a little gap there, and when the engine is running, you can see that it was kind of splashing the fuel out and becoming messy, and we don't want gas flying out of the fuel tank from the vibrations. So go ahead and use the thicker line. Alright, this hose line sits in the fuel. Make it long enough so it goes right into the fuel. And this fuel line right here does not need to sit in the fuel. It can be short if needed. That way it sits and it fits into that hole and it seals much, much better. Alright, use a tool or something to kind of poke it in the hole. Let's see how that is. Let's see if we get any gas spraying or leaking out of there. Try it again. Alright, so once we got it started, we realized it wasn't idling fast enough. So what we did is we just found the little idle adjustment screw there, and you turn it clockwise and you can speed up the idle just like that. Alright, you can see right here what I did was once I got it started with my hand off the trigger, I adjusted the idle screw a little bit just to fine tune it. It should idle without it going too fast or too slow and stalling.